have the delightful pleasure of introducing Jeremy Smith, who I just got a chance to hear at the Green Lecture Series at Naropa just a little while ago. Jeremy is a writer and freelance journalist, grew up in the Midwest, ran off to Harvard, and now is in Montana. He'll tell you more about that. Actually, Jeremy is disguised as an educator with a heart of gold. He's just a wonderful person to have present information about community and gardens. There was something that I wanted to read here that I thought was really right on, and that is that Jeremy busts myths that local food is not too expensive, it's not too time-consuming, it does not need a California climate, and it's not elitist. And he's going to demonstrate that tonight with his presentation. So, Jeremy, it's yours.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for that introduction, Lynette Marie. Thanks for Transition Colorado for bringing me here to Boulder today. Thank you, Left Hand Books, for hosting us. This is a great space. I was wandering the city earlier this morning, and I knew I was going to come back here, but I couldn't help it. I still stayed about 20 minutes, browsed, bought a couple books. Hope you do the same. Maybe one called Growing a Garden City. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. I'm very happy to be in Boulder. Now, where I live now is in Montana. It is the city of Missoula. Have any of you ever been to Missoula? Could you raise your hand if you have? Okay. 1, 2, 3 of us. Okay. To everyone else, greetings from Missoula. Or slightly perhaps more accurate rendition would be this picture. This probably looks kind of familiar to you. It's a Rocky Mountain city of about 70,000 people. It's in a valley surrounded by rolling peaks. It's the county seat, and it's the home to the University of Montana. It has about 10,000 students. So a population smaller than Denver, but also a student population significantly smaller than CU. So fewer people, but also a larger percentage of people who are not students. There are no back-to-the-land rural homesteads here. You can see it is Montana, but there is still, somehow, infrastructure. It is a city. At the same time, unlike Boulder, elite urban areas are hundreds, if not thousands, of miles away. The downtown is both pretty and gritty. There's coffee shops, there's boutiques, there's a river that runs through it. That is the river from the book and the movie, a river runs through it. There's also a closed department store. There's a large homeless population, and there are several busy food banks. If this is going to be a city trying to feed itself, the needs are great and the challenges are maybe even greater. To begin with, 1 in 5 residents lives in poverty. And it is Montana. The frost-free growing season averages fewer than 120 days. Nevertheless, for many people here in Missoula, fresh, local, organic food is normal, not special. The stories behind how and why that happened, and how those stories can and are being recreated in their own way across the country, including in Boulder, and around the world, became my new book, Growing a Garden City. And the good news is, after spending 3 years researching and writing it, I'm convinced that the local food movement, for all its remarkable growth over the last 2 decades, and especially the last decade, is just getting started. There are millions of new faces of local food about to flood in or flooding in as we speak. And I want to introduce you to some of them. First, I want to give a little background, look at what may be a few familiar pieces for you. Could you raise your hand if you have ever been to a farmer's market? Okay. It's almost, it's a punchline now when I give these talks. Would not have been a laugh line 30 years ago, for sure. But farmer's market, of course. Farmer comes to the city, sells goods directly to city residents. It's a great deal for the farmer. in the sense that there's no middleman. You get to keep the profits. It's a good deal for the consumer. You get the best, freshest possible foods you can't get at stores, or if you could, they'd cost much more. And both parties enjoy the relationship with each other. You get to know who grows your food, and they get to know who's eating the food they grow. Even beyond that direct consumer-producer relationship, there's a social side just to the farmer's market itself. Sociologists have studied, Bill McKibben writes in the introduction to Growing a Garden City, that people have on average 10 times the number of conversations at farmers markets than they do in the supermarket. And I don't know if you're like me, that's probably an understatement. Okay. So a few different things are going on there. Another big important aspect of the local food movement, one that's gotten a lot of press lately with big White House support. This is a community garden plot. Could you raise your hand if any of you have participated in a community garden? Okay. Again, about half of us. Community gardens are communal spaces but you get your own plot of land within it. So here, for example, it's a 15 by 15 foot plot. It's one of about 40 of them in this particular community garden. You pay $35, $40 for the season. You get all free soil, water, tools, supplies to do the farming, and advice from an organizer and the example of all the other gardeners around you. It's a way to get 40 years of gardening experience in one summer. Just look at 39 other plots and your own. I asked a model to demonstrate how it works. Here we go. You prepare the soil, you plant, you water, strawberries. You know, I talked to a community gardener. He said, I was showing up. It was kind of fun, just hanging out, plant, talk to people a little bit, come back the next day, next week, so on. And then one day there was this food that somehow was in my community garden plot. I took it home, but it felt like stealing. I liked that. So, community gardens. Another aspect, one of the newer aspects, and one of the biggest ones now, is something called CSA. How many of you participate in a CSA? Okay. Again, about half of us. CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. Big fancy word, it means farm subscription. You pay a few $100 at the beginning of the season, and every week throughout the growing season you get a big box of produce of whatever's in season that particular week. So this week, for example, looks like they're getting summer squash, cucumbers, leeks, red onions, basil leaves. Not doing too bad for October. And it's kind of like the farmer's market, but even more so. You're getting to know the farmer who grows your food over the course of the summer, week in, week out, and he or she is getting to know you. And it's often called, CSA is sometimes colloquially called food with the farmer's face on it. You really have that relationship and it deepens. And you can say, hey, I wouldn't mind a little more basil next year. What do you do with this broccoli? Or I loved that chard. I can't believe it. I thought I hated chard. What'd you do there? And a CSA can include other farm goods like bread or dairy or cheese or meats. So here's an example. Taking home the harvest. You're getting to know not just the farmer in these cases, but the farm itself too, which is kind of cool. So the Garden City concept includes all those pieces. It includes farmers markets. It includes community gardens. It includes CSAs, but its real center is something new and bigger, something I call agriculture-supported community. Agriculture-supported community. That sounds a lot like community-supported agriculture. Let's look at the difference between the two of those. Community-supported agriculture is when you have a group of individuals coming together to support a farm. Say, the 6 of you over here, you subscribe to the farm. Every week, they're growing food for you. You're the customers of that farm. Agriculture-supported community, on the other hand, is when you have a network of community farms and gardens themselves joining up to support the diverse residents of a neighborhood, or in some cases, an entire city. In Missoula, that network is called Garden City Harvest. It's a nonprofit collaboration joining over a dozen community farms and gardens spread across the city, each with totally different programs and participants, each with its own ecosystem, if you will. Here, for example, is Joe. Joe is a first grader at Rattlesnake Elementary School. Love living in Montana. We get really cool school names, Rattlesnake Elementary School. He is on a Garden City Harvest Farm field trip. It's a cute picture, but the carrot is also critically important. According to the Centers for Disease Control, if current trends hold, 1/3 of today's elementary school students, kids outside on the street, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, you see them every day, kids nationwide like Joe, will develop diet-related type 2 diabetes. Used to be called adult onset diabetes. This is its new face. This is not, this could happen. This is what will happen if things stay the way they are. Some of them will get it by the time they graduate from high school. 1 in 3 kids sick for life. As I saw, though, visits to local farms and gardens convince, in some cases, these notoriously picky eaters to eat more fruits and vegetables. Here, after all, the produce is fresh, it's delicious. And what is maybe most important? How do you get kids to eat a carrot? Could someone give me? Get them to pull it out of the ground. Sword in the stone. Pull the carrot out yourself. Great idea. Other suggestions? There's not a right or wrong answer. Just some good ideas out there. Other ideas?
To grow it.
Grow it themselves. Great. Yeah.
Cook with it.
Cook with it. Yeah. What?
Juice it.
Juice it. Yeah. Have fun with it. I think all those are just essential. All those are great. And I think an underlooked element, one of the most important elements in getting kids to eat vegetables, is to make them as dirty as possible. Don't look at this kid. Look at the kid behind that kid. Look at his eyes beating down on that dirt. 10 seconds later, done. I stood behind these kids and I just eavesdropped as they were eating kale for the first time in their lives. They had never heard of kale. They had never seen kale. They had no idea, what it was, where it came from, and they're putting it in their mouths. And I'm standing over them. First kid goes, "It's icky." Second kid goes, "It's yummy." Third kid goes, I love this is like future Supreme Court justice, bringing everyone together. He goes, "It's good icky." How do you get kids to eat vegetables? You make them good icky. However you need to do it, good icky. And they're jumping in front of each other to try more. Now, the farm where Joe and his class visited is a Garden City Harvest student farm. As it happens, students from the University of Montana at this particular site take classes to learn how to grow organic food. And community members support it by subscribing to a CSA. So you've got college students who are providing the labor, growing the food, and learning how to grow the food. And community members are coming by every week to get a box of the produce grown. So they have real production obligations. It's not just an academic exercise. But the site itself for this particular farm is on land leased from the public school system. These kids own this farm. They're the landlords. And word got around. They had some dirty carrots here. They had some good, icky kale. More and more of these kids started coming. And that was actually a challenge. How many of you farm yourselves? Do any of you? Okay. Do you have a CSA by chance? Okay. What would happen if on the day when people are coming to pick up the food, where you're supposed to harvest, get it cleaned, set up, box distributed, 100 7-year-olds show up? Could be a challenge. It could be an opportunity, but it could be a challenge too. Could be a challenge. Okay. It's great. People say, "Oh, have the kids pick." You're going to break even at best. Even having the college students pick isn't always a great idea. But at the same time, These are your landlords. What are you going to do? You know, are you going to let them ruin your crops, ruin your customer relationship? Or are you going to ruin their time and get kicked off the land? I mean, you've got what could be a problem. Well, sometimes the solution to community problems is to add even more community to the community farm. What they did was agriculture supported community. Organizers asked, who can contribute what we need? Who needs what we can contribute? Who can make it a good thing that these kids are here? Who can contribute what the kids need and who needs what the kids can contribute? What's an idea? How could that, you know, what could you do to, you know, have the kids be a positive force there?
Supervision.
Supervision, yeah, for sure, yeah. That's helping
Fun.
make the work fun, or, you know, distracting at least enough so they don't get in the way of the people who've really got to get a lot of work done in a hurry. Yeah, these are all good ideas. Any other ideas? Well, those are all right answers. It just depends on what you have there. In this case, it was already a student farm, remember?
Yeah.
In this case, the university, they weren't saying, oh, we'll have our students who are trying to learn to farm be babysitters or something like that, but they said, we have other students. Students who want to become teachers. Let's make leading those public school class field trips to the farm part of our teaching program in environmental education. All of a sudden, you have dozens of college students desperate for teaching experience, vying to lead these kids' field trips. It's a win-win-win. This guy gets the experience in the classroom, out of the classroom, but he gets the teaching experience he needs to become a teacher. These kids get their field trip, and all the other college students are who wanted to learn how to farm, are able to grow. Looks like they're doing all right, growing the food they need. Food grows, kids visit, would-be teachers train. Once all the teachers jumped in, you could accommodate a lot more of these students. Today, over 2,500 public school students visit this one farm annually. Remember, it's a population of 70,000. 1 in every 20 to 30 people in this town is a little kid who's gone to this farm this year. The field trips snowball, like so much else in this movement. The field trips have led to farm and garden summer camps, after school programs, and now, real hot topic, growing number of school gardens on site. With a school garden, what was once a year or at most once a month experience with their local food system becomes part of kids' everyday experience. Here it is. You can see an art project, some building. They call it a community garden and classroom, but it's a school garden. Let's go inside. It's looking pretty good. Benches. You can do math, science stuff with the rows. Growing the food, getting involved, being able to walk through. There's some paths for the kids. Trellis, shade area, more art projects, place to hang out. There's school in the back room. And here they are. They don't need the farm field trip. They can still go on it, and that's great, but now it's just part of their everyday landscape, part of their everyday life. They go to school, they're also going by local food. And I can't promise this is going to happen every time, but I checked in on one of the classes that had done these field trips, followed up. The first graders had become third graders. I talked to their teacher. They had changed their daily snack from cookies to kale. Pretty neat. And they could pretty much brag about it. Oh, you've got cookies. Yeah, we used to have cookies. We got something a little good ickier. Now, agriculture-supported community is also behind this teenager's story. Hannah was just 16 when it starts. I was living in Seattle with my family, and I became a lost, terrible person, she told me. Drugs, running away, bad people, hurting people, ruining my whole life. One day my dad found me, bungee corded me, took away my shoes, chains, knives, and drugs, threw me in the back of his Subaru, and drove us all night to where his parents were living. He'd found her on the street, and he said, I'm going to put you in a foster home because I'm going to find you dead. That's the next time we're going to meet. And she said, if you put me in a foster home, I'll just run away. This is a really common story in this country. It's too common, way too common. About 500,000 young people in the United States every year, half a million kids under the age of 18 enter detention centers. And those are the kids who get caught. Tons more on the street. Well, I told you about the student farm. Some of the people who at the student farm go on to become farmers. Others are just college students. They take that course for a semester or two. It's part of their college career, but they don't do that for the rest of their life. A former graduate student at the student farm ended up getting his degree in therapy. And he had the idea to use the farm to help people like Hannah. The idea was a healthy community isn't a place for people without problems. It's a place where there's spaces for those problems to heal. Now, I know in Colorado, you have the experience he'd had. He'd already seen this with wilderness therapy programs. If you're not familiar with this, it's where you get kids outdoors, away from the harmful environment at hand. You teach them to trust themselves and each other, and they receive the therapy necessary to heal. Well, his thought was, why not do a farm work therapy program? We'll still be outside, we'll still have those opportunities, but there'll be a lot of additional benefits. Participants like Hannah go from being troubled or in trouble to a contributor in their community. They get a job, they'd learn a skill, they'd receive therapy, and maybe a new sense of self. A forward-thinking youth drug court judge signed on, and soon you had a half dozen adjudicated or referred teens like Hannah working on the student farm every summer alongside the college students. Working hard together, watching food grow, getting paid, these kids become a tribe. They're bound to one another. They learn they can depend on one another and that people really depend on them. They learn they can be personally effective. They see that they, for the first time, can make a positive change in the world. There was no right or wrong way to do something.